Many factions exist within the world of Fallout. These are groups that have banded together through shared ideals, goals, and beliefs. Some aim to rebuild civilization, others seek power, and a few are just trying to survive by any means necessary. On the West Coast, these factions have helped shape the politics, conflicts, and culture of the wasteland. Today, let's go over every notable West Coast Fallout faction in about a minute or less, sometimes more. I didn't really time myself, if I'm honest. One quick note, I've excluded settlement-based groups like the West Side Militia or the Slags. These feel better suited for a different video. The factions I've included here have a core ideology, some kind of internal structure, defined goals, and at least a little iconography, uniforms, mottos, that sort of thing. This is every notable West Coast Fallout faction explained. Let's get into it. Lost Hills Brotherhood. I've split all the Brotherhood into chapters. I think they're different enough to warrant the distinction. The Lost Hills Brotherhood of Steel is the original chapter, founded shortly after the Great War of 2077. It began with a rogue US military unit led by Captain Roger Maxon. Stationed at the Mariposa military base, Maxon uncovered unethical experiments involving the forced evolutionary virus, or FEV. After executing the responsible scientists and going AWOL, he led his unit and their families into the Californian wasteland, eventually settling in a pre-war bunker near Lost Hills. Though it didn't start as one, the group evolved into a techno-religious order devoted to preserving and controlling advanced technology. Over time, the Lost Hills chapter became highly isolationist, believing most of humanity was unworthy of wielding pre-war tech. Their strict hierarchy and belief in technological supremacy made them powerful, but also rigid. Lost Hills served as the Brotherhood's command center during its peak, directing operations across the West and sending recon teams across the country. But internal schisms and external threats, like the NCR and the Enclave, gradually weakened their grip. The Brotherhood remained small and underground for years, but by 2296, with the NCR's power waning in Southern California and reinforcements arriving from the east, the Brotherhood resurfaced, operating under a united front and from an abandoned airfield. The Hub Merchants. The Hub is one of the largest and most influential trading centers on the post-apocalyptic West Coast, built in a filthy desert oasis and the ruins of an old town. It rose to prominence in the decades after the Great War, thanks to the resourcefulness of its survivors and their founding governor, a man named Angus. Among its most powerful groups are the Hub Merchants, wealthy, well-organized caravaneers who turned trade into a political force. After 2 years of a conflict that was known as the Great Merchant Wars, the Hub restructured its government into a 6-person council. 2 representatives from each of the 3 major trading houses, the Crimson Caravan, the Fargo Traders, and the Water Merchants, held all decision-making power. Though not a traditional government, the Merchant Council effectively ruled the Hub. Their reach extended far beyond the city walls, as they played a major role in keeping the other settlements alive and helped shape the early economy of the new California Republic. As the NCR expanded, though, the Hub eventually transitioned back to a more conventional form of governance. Even so, the merchant houses never really lost their power, as to this day, they remain some of the largest and most influential trading companies in the wasteland. Before moving on, let me just say that, like settlements, I would normally exclude merchants from this video, as they don't really seem like factions to me. But the Hub merchants are different in that they managed to come together to take control of the Hub and form one of its earliest governing bodies. Moving on. Children of the Cathedral. The Children of the Cathedral were a religious organization that emerged in Southern California in the decades that followed the Great War. On the surface, they preached peace, healing, and unity, offering aid to the sick and shelter to the lost. You know, what you'd expect from a benevolent religious group. In reality, though, the Children were a front for the Unity, the Masters' plan to forcibly evolve humanity into a new species through the use of the forced evolutionary virus. The Master believed that by merging all people into one mutated race, conflict and division would end. The children served as his loyal missionaries, secretly spreading propaganda, gathering information, and preparing the wasteland for a mass conversion. Their headquarters was the Cathedral, a pre-war building which hid the Los Angeles demonstration vault, which eventually became the Master's lair. While many low-ranking members were true believers, like the actual kids in their ranks, the inner circle understood the group's darker purpose. Some aided in FEV research and abduction, even. The children would eventually be destroyed in 2162 during the events of the first Fallout game. The Vault Dweller would confront the Master and either convince him of his plan's flaws or destroy him outright. With their leader gone, the organization collapsed. However, reportedly there have been some sightings of scattered survivors and rogue followers of the Master across the wasteland. Followers of the Apocalypse. The Followers of the Apocalypse are a humanitarian organization founded by a group of former Vault Dwellers. Their primary base is in the ruins of an old library in Los Angeles. Made up of scientists, doctors, teachers, and idealists, the group formed in direct opposition to the violence, ignorance, and inequality that dominated the pre- and post-war world. Their mission was simple: educate, heal, and help rebuild civilization through knowledge and compassion. The followers work to spread information freely. They believe that education is the only way to prevent history from repeating itself. Though they are based in the Boneyard, the followers have outposts and field agents scattered throughout the wasteland. They offer free medical care, run schools, and assist struggling communities, often putting them at odds with more authoritarian factions. Despite lacking a formal military, they've survived through public support, discretion, and strong leadership. They've had close ties to key figures in New California Republic history and helped shape some of its early ideals. However, this relationship has since fallen out as of late, as the NCR continues to expand their borders and influence. While not flashy or powerful, the followers are among the few groups in the wasteland driven by genuine altruism. In a world scattered by war, their quiet work seems to be the only real hope for lasting peace and progress. The Cons. The first of 3 con iterations is the original Cons. The Cons are one of 3 raider groups that emerged from Vault 15. Led by a man named Garl Deathhand, who is the son of the group's founder, the Cons had a reputation for extreme cruelty. Garl only accepted the most ruthless raiders for admission into their group. They regularly raided the small desert settlement of Shady Sands, coincidentally the descendants of their former Vault 15 bunkmates. Despite their savagery, the Cons maintained a loose code of honor centered around strength and survival. However, their downfall came when they kidnapped Tandy, daughter of Aradesh, who is the leader of Shady Sands. Big mistake. The Vault Dweller was tasked with saving Tandy and destroying the Raider gang, and bringing an end to their tyranny. For now. The Underground. Remember a couple minutes ago how we said the hub merchants were once in charge of the hub? Well, that's not quite true. By the start of Fallout 1, the city was heavily corrupted, and its affairs were secretly being influenced by a faction known as the Underground. The Underground was a criminal syndicate operating underneath, hence the name, the Maltese Falcon Bar. Led by the smooth-talking and ruthless Mr. Decker, the Underground ran extortion, assassinations, and blackmail rackets, all from the shadows. Decker had even taken full control of Fargo traders, leaving the owner, Butch Harris, merely as a figurehead. With this influence, Decker pulled the strings for the hub, using his enforcer Kane to handle any of the dirty work. Local law enforcement did suspect him, but fear and lack of tangible evidence kept him untouchable. While not a massive faction, it is worth a mention. The Unity. The Unity was a radical mutant movement led by the Master. The Master, once known as Richard Gray or Moreau, became an amalgamated fusion of man and machine following an accident with the forced evolutionary virus. Following his transition, the Master developed a new vision for humanity. He wished to end the suffering of man by forcefully converting them into super mutants. These mutants, he believed, would be stronger, immune to disease, and most importantly, united, free from war and division. Operating from the Los Angeles Demonstration Vault and the Mariposa military base, the unity spread through both science and faith. On one side, the Master's followers, super mutants and loyal cultists, kidnapped wastelanders to dip into vats of FEV. On the other, as mentioned before, the Children of the Cathedral acted as a front, preaching peace while secretly preparing for mass mutation. The Unity movement wasn't explicitly about a conquest for power, rather the Master truly believed he was bringing salvation through force. The Master believed that by evolving humanity into a single, perfect race, he could eliminate the root causes of conflict. Those who resisted this message had to be forcefully assimilated or outright destroyed. If you think about it for a little bit, it is a little ironic, I'll admit. But anyway, his plan worked well for some time. By 2162, the Unity had built an army and prepared to spread across California. But the Master and the Unity fell when the Vault Dweller uncovered the truth and confronted the Master. Depending on the player's choices, the Unity was stopped either through sheer violence or by exposing a flaw in its logic. Super mutants couldn't reproduce, ultimately leaving the plan doomed to fail. One way or the other, the Unity and Master would be destroyed. However, remnants of the Unity can be seen throughout the West Coast. Many scattered mutants and former Unity members can be found across the wasteland. The Blades. The Blades are a survivor community in the Boneyard, named after a fated Blades Razorad. They trace their roots back to the Los Angeles Vault. Their early history centered around a several-year-long war with another gang, a group known as the Rippers. While the Blades did eventually come out on top, they were left weakened and disorganized. Their fortunes began to shift more recently when Razor, a former thief from the hub, became their informal leader. She tried to bring order and hope to the group, but found herself constantly undermined by the Regulators, Adidam's paramilitary enforcers. The worst of it came when Josh Zimmerman, the mayor's son and secret Blade sympathizer, was brutally murdered by the Regulators. The Regulators blamed the Blades, convincing his father, the mayor of course, that the group was beyond saving. The rest of the Boneyard believed it too, seeing the Blades as nothing more than raiders waiting to be put down. Cut off from resources and surrounded by hostility, the Blades had little means of defending themselves. Even the nearby Gunrunners were unreachable, separated by a stretch of land infested with deathclaws. Still, under Razor and the newly arrived fighter McRae, the Blades held on. They're still at the bottom of Boneyard's food chain, doing their best to survive, but maybe a special someone can turn that around. The Desert Rangers. The Desert Rangers were a legendary peacekeeping force born in the untamed wastes of Nevada. Descended from the pre-war Texas Rangers, their primary mission is to make the wasteland a better place. For decades, the Rangers patrolled across Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, fighting off raiders, slavers, and violent tribes. But their greatest challenge came when they crossed paths with a massive warband known as Kaiser's Legion. Though highly skilled and disciplined, the Rangers were severely outnumbered. While their resistance was stalwart, it was also unsustainable. Slowly pushed out of Arizona, they found themselves facing their own extinction. In 2271, with nowhere else to go, the Desert Rangers signed the Ranger Unification Treaty with the new California Republic. In exchange for protecting the Mojave from the Legion, the Rangers agreed to merge with the NCR's military, forming the elite NCR Rangers. Their gear, tactics, and legacy would live on, but their independence was now gone. The Gunrunners. The Gunrunners began as a small-time gang from the hub, relocating to the ruins of Los Angeles around 2131. Initially settling in a derelict factory in the Boneyard, they made a name for themselves by trading firearms. Over time, profit proved more powerful than street cred, and the gang evolved into a dedicated arms manufacturer. They repurposed pre-war machinery and tapped into the surrounding ruins for metal, even producing some weapons that could rival anything from before the bombs. By 2155, they'd officially become the Gunrunners, no longer a gang, but a powerful trading outfit. Eventually, their weapons and ammo soon became essential to the New California Republic's growing military. Over time, the Gunrunners became the NCR's top arms supplier, with their goods found everywhere from the Boneyard Streets all the way to the Hoover Dam. Let me just say that I know that, like the hub merchants, Gunrunners are also merchants, but they did start as a gang, so I felt the need to include them. The Skulls. The Skulls are a small-time gang located in Junktown. Led by Vinny, the gang does Gizmo's bidding and dirty work, helping the greedy businessman keep his power and influence over the settlement. And that's about it. They're not too noteworthy, if I'm honest. The Regulators. The Regulators began as one of several groups that emerged from the LA Vault after it opened in 2092. Initially co-founders of Addendum alongside other Vault dwellers, they later splintered, with some becoming the aforementioned Blades. But by 2158, the original Regulators were replaced by hired mercenaries led by a man named Caleb. Caleb seized power and reduced Addendum's mayor, John Zimmerman, to a puppet. Under Caleb's rule, the Regulators turned Addendum into a tightly controlled police state disguised as a peaceful community. To outsiders, the Regulators seemed like a standard militia force, firm, maybe a bit harsh, but to those living in Addendum, it was clear that they ruled through fear. The Blades, living nearby, instead were painted as violent terrorists, the root of all the problems in the settlement, in fact. In secret, Caleb orchestrated fake attacks, planted bodies, and fabricated stories about kidnappings and suicide bombers. In reality, though, the Blades were just survivalists trying to get by. Though most out-of-towners quietly suffer under Regulator rule, their grip remained unchallenged. Well, that is until the Vault Dweller arrived, freeing the population. The Circle of Thieves. The Circle of Thieves is a loosely organized band of rogues and thieves located in the hub. Led by Loxley, the group aims to combat the wealth inequality created by the merchant houses. They steal from the rich and give a percentage of it to the poor. They're not a major player within the hub's power structure, but they do their best to combat the unfair living conditions of the region. The Bishop family. The first of four ruling families of New Reno are the Bishops. Led by John Bishop and operating out of the Shark Club Casino, they are known for their political ambitions, wanting to bring an end to the crime family anarchy of New Reno and create an alliance with the New California Republic. This sets them apart from the other families whose business interests seem more focused on gambling and other vices. Dick Enclave. I've also decided to separate the Enclave by leader as well. It just made the most sense, I think. Operating from an offshore oil rig west of California, the Enclave sees itself as the legitimate continuation of the US and aims to reclaim control over the post-apocalyptic wasteland. They are led by President Dick Richardson. Technologically advanced and heavily militarized, the Enclave possesses power armor, energy weapons, and access to pre-war research. They believe in the purity of humanity, considering wastelanders exposed to radiation, ghouls, and mutants to be genetically inferior, and seek to wipe them out to create a clean human population under their control. The Enclave's main project in Fallout 2 is the release of the FEV Curling 13, a bioweapon designed to exterminate all mutated life. They kidnap villagers from Arroyo and Vault 13 dwellers for testing, prompting the Chosen One's mission to stop the faction. Once their oil rig and leadership was destroyed, the NCR would attempt to rid the rest of the region of Enclave presence, pushing any remnants eastwards. The New Cons. The second iteration of the original Cons faction are the New Cons. After the Vault Dweller eradicated the original Cons, the only survivor, Garl Deathhand's son, a man named Darian, swore to take revenge on those responsible for the death of his father and tribe. And so he dedicated himself to rebuilding the Cons, hiring mercenaries to fill out the ranks of his new Cons. Darian and his new Cons used the ruined Vault 15 as their main base of operations. It was from there that they would kidnap wastelanders and commit raids on NCR caravans. This raider life would eventually come to an end when NCR President Tandy asked the Chosen One to retrieve computer parts from Vault 15. There, the Chosen One discovered the new cons and ultimately killed their leader, just like their own ancestor did many years ago. Despite this complete eradication of the original Khan's bloodline, this wouldn't quite be the end for the Khans. We'll get to that later. The Mordino family. The Mordino family is the next major crime family in New Reno. They operate out of the Desperado Casino, led by Big Jesus Mordino. While the patriarch of the Mordino family and his son started off as New Reno slaves, they managed to flip their fortune, ending up as one of the most powerful families in the sinful city. Their influence in New Reno comes largely from finding a boy genius, a kid named Myron, who managed to craft an extremely addictive form of the chem jet. Its addictive nature resulted in the Mordino family having a pseudo-control over the city's population. They were hooked and constantly needed more. However, just as their rise to power was swift, so too was their fall. The cure for jet addiction and the death of Myron came not 1 year after the events of Fallout 2, fading the Mordino family into obscurity. The New California Republic. The New California Republic, or NCR, is a post-war democratic republic founded in 2186, originating from the settlement of Shady Sands. Built on pre-war American values such as representative democracy, law, and military strength, the NCR seeks to restore order and civilization to the wasteland. The NCR consists of multiple states and territories, including Los Angeles, the Hub, and various annexed regions. While the Republic promotes order, education, and trade, its expansionist policies have led to internal corruption, overextended supply lines, and regional unrest. By the time of Fallout 2, 2241, the NCR is beginning to assert influence beyond its borders, particularly into Vault City and New Reno. We see tensions with these independent settlements rise as the Republic is shown to be increasingly persistent. While its intentions are good, rooted in rebuilding society, its growing complexity and imperial approach hint at future conflicts to come. In the years leading up to Fallout New Vegas, the NCR pushed into the Mojave wasteland. Key goals included securing the Hoover Dam and New Vegas Strip. This campaign placed them in direct conflict with Kaiser's Legion, a brutal empire advancing from the east. The resulting standoff would escalate into not only the first battle of the Hoover Dam, but also the second battle of the Hoover Dam. Though the NCR had superior technology, training, and numbers, its Mojave forces were strained. Troops are underpaid, leadership is divided, and the local population is often indifferent or outwardly hostile. The NCR struggled to adapt to guerrilla warfare and the unique political landscape of the Mojave, leading to mixed public support and ultimately a stagnant campaign. Despite these challenges, the NCR remained as one of the most powerful and influential factions in the post-war apocalyptic West. Well, that is until the events of Fallout's TV show, where we learn of not only what seems like their retreat from the Mojave, but also of a significant loss of territory with the destruction of Shady Sands and a defeat at the Griffith Observatory. While the NCR as a whole might not be entirely destroyed, it seems like they have lost a significant amount of influence in southern New California. The Salvatore family. The Salvatore family is another one of 4 major crime families operating in New Reno in Fallout 2. Known for their secretive and brutal nature, the Salvatores are distinguished by their access to advanced energy weapons, specifically laser pistols, which they acquired through a covert deal with the Enclave. This relationship makes them one of the most technologically advanced gangs in the city. Led by Louis Salvatore, an aging and sickly patriarch, the family maintains power over New Reno's West Side district. Their operations are less flashy than other families, often using subterfuge to further their goals. However, by the time of New Vegas, it would seem that the Salvatore family is no more. The Sidhe. A prominent faction from the second Fallout game are the Sidhe. The Sidhe are a technologically advanced faction located in San Francisco. They are the descendants of the crew of a Chinese nuclear submarine, the Shi Huangti, which crashed into the city's harbor during the Great War. Following the crash, the surviving crew established a self-sustaining community rooted in Chinese language, culture, and scientific research. The Shi are led by the Emperor, an advanced computer whose predictions are then interpreted by its advisor, a man named Ken Li. According to Ken, he brings forth the wisdom of the Emperor. The Shi prioritize scientific advancement, particularly in biology, energy weapons, and fuel production. Some of their most notable achievements include the restoration of pre-war power armor, the synthesization of a new fuel source, and potential vertebrate mass production. The Shi prefer to keep to themselves, away from the power struggles of the Western wasteland. Despite this, however, they do see the Habologists as an aggressive cult that need to be eradicated. While we've yet to hear about them much since Fallout 2, that can likely be chalked up to their isolated nature. The Habologists. The Habologists are a religious cult based in San Francisco in Fallout 2. Inspired by, well, I'm not going to say who they're inspired by, you probably already know. Founded by a man known as Dick the Hub Hubble, the group believes heavily in a form of spirituality. According to Habology doctrine, humans are burdened by a parasitic spiritual entity called neurodynes, which prevent personal and cosmic enlightenment. Habologists pursue enlightenment by undergoing a series of alignments, each supposedly removing more neurodynes from their bodies. In reality, these rituals are done through the controlled emission of something called zeta radiation into the subject's brain. High-ranking members claim they are preparing for an interstellar journey aboard a starship, the ESS Quetzal, which they believe will take them to the heavens to be with a being known as the Starfather. By 2241, the Habologists have established a base near the Golden Gate Bridge, occupying parts of San Francisco. The group seeks technology to power their spacecraft, and will gladly recruit the Chosen One to aid their cause. The Slavers Guild. The Slavers Guild is a criminal organization operating in Fallout 2, primarily based in the Den. Led by a man named Metzger, the group, as expected, captures and sells slaves throughout the western wasteland. The Slavers Guild fills a unique gap in the landscape of New California. Smaller communities aren't typically strong enough to protect their population from the Guild, while larger communities like Vault City and New Reno are the Guild's best customers. The biggest threat to the Slavers Guild are the New California Republic Rangers, whose biggest objective as of the events of Fallout 2 is the eradication of the slave trade. While it's never confirmed, it would seem that by the NCR's peak around 2281, slavery practices in NCR territory were completely gone, Slavers Guild included. Tanker Vagrants. Normally this would be one of those factions that I would omit from this kind of video. At first glance they seem a little too generic, like the Vault 15 Squatters or the Anti-Mutant Conspiracy. But despite the generic sounding name, the Tanker Vagrants do have a unique identity within the wasteland. The Tanker Vagrants are a small, close-knit community residing in an old, abandoned, and anchored tanker in the San Francisco harbor. They're led by an Enclave technician, A. Ron Myers, who abandoned the faction after realizing that the Enclave wasn't the USA he was fighting for. Inspired by punk culture, the faction is made up of not only wanderers, survivalists, and social outcasts, but musicians, tech heads, geeks, and artists. They're all united by the common goal of finding personal freedom in the ever-changing wasteland. And I think that's pretty cool. The Temperance Union. One of the lesser-known factions in Fallout is the Temperance Union. They're a prohibition movement wanting to see New Reno become free of all alcoholic beverages. Made up of exactly 2 people, the Temperance Union is really quite terrible at what they're trying to achieve. One founding member is Ethel Wright, the wife of Orville Wright, who's not only the head of the Wright crime family, but also New Reno's biggest supplier of booze and alcohol. The other founding member is Father Tully, the head priest of the ironically named Drunk Cupid Chapel. Tully tops off this terrible union by always being drunk and using church funds to continue his alcoholism. Yeah, bud, I don't think this Temperance Union thing is going to work out all too well. The Wright family. Speaking of the Wright family, the Wrights are the final and weakest of the 4 New Reno crime families. Led by Orville Wright, The family managed to get by through sheer perseverance. Even though Orville's wife Ethel does her best to stop the flow of alcohol through the New Reno streets, Orville ensures that the family stays afloat, as alcohol sales to the other families is their primary source of income and influence. Their perseverance would hold true once again in the aftermath of Fallout 2, as they managed to outlast both the Salvatore and Mordino family, finding themselves still in control of New Reno, alongside the newly elevated Van Graffs and the Bishops by the start of New Vegas. The Yakuza. The Yakuza are a small group of martial artists and gangsters found in New Reno. They wear black leather, wield wakizashis, and believe that killing is an art. Aside from that, there's not much else known about the Yakuza. Caesar's Legion. Caesar's Legion is a totalitarian, slaver-based society founded by Edward Sallow, who took the name Caesar. First introduced in Fallout New Vegas, the Legion draws heavy inspiration from the structure and discipline of ancient Rome. Formed in the post-apocalyptic American Southwest, the Legion began when Sallow, a former follower of the Followers of the Apocalypse, was sent on an expedition east. There he used tribal warfare and Roman ideology to forge a brutal empire. The Legion absorbs defeated tribes by erasing their identities and integrating their members as slaves or soldiers. Yeah, you kind of forgot about the Followers' way, eh? Caesar rules as an absolute dictator and enforces a strict hierarchy. At the bottom are slaves, followed by legionaries who make up the military corps. Above them are centurions, praetorians, and a small inner circle of trusted advisors. Women are considered inferior and are not permitted to serve as soldiers. The Legion values discipline, order, and strength. Dissent is punished harshly, and displays of weakness are eradicated entirely. Public crucifixions and slavery are common. Despite its brutality, Caesar believes the Legion is a civilizing force meant to unify the post-war world through conquest. By the events of New Vegas, Caesar's Legion has expanded west and seeks to conquer the Mojave wasteland, clashing with the New California Republic at the Hoover Dam. Whether they're viewed as a stabilizing force or a barbaric dictatorship, one thing is clear. The Legion is one of the most feared factions in the post-war world. The Chairmen. The Chairmen are one of three major casino-owning factions operating on the New Vegas Strip. They run the Tops Casino, a high-end establishment known for its retro aesthetic, live performances, and polished presentation. The group operates under the oversight of Mr. House, who granted them control of the casino after the Strip was restored. Originally descended from a post-apocalyptic tribal group known as the Mojave Bootriders, the Chairmen were civilized by Mr. House, who erased their tribal identity and imposed a 1950s-style gangster persona as part of his effort to revive old-world glamour. They adopted tailor suits, slicked-back hair, and a cool Rat Pack attitude. The Chairmen are led by Benny, a charismatic but ambitious figure who plays a central role in the beginning events of New Vegas. Benny's betrayal of Mr. House and attempted takeover of New Vegas sets off essentially the entire storyline for the game. The Omertas. The Omertas are the second of three major casino families operating in New Vegas. They control the Gomorrah Casino, which caters to gambling, adult entertainment, and other vice-driven activities. Like the other families on the Strip, the Omertas were once a tribal group known as the Slitherkin that Mr. House civilized, giving them a new identity modeled after organized crime syndicates. Despite agreeing to House's terms, the Omertas are secretly working to undermine him. Behind closed doors, they have an alliance with Caesar's Legion and plan to stage a violent coup. The Omertas are led by Nero and right-hand man Big Sal, who manage most of the family's operations. However, the player can help usurp this pair and replace their management with Caccino, ruining their coup. The White Glove Society. The White Glove Society are the final of three main casino families on the New Vegas Strip, operating the Ultralux Casino. Outwardly, the group presents itself as a refined and cultured organization, favoring manners, high fashion, and exclusivity. They are known for their formal attire, including their masks, and claim to have distanced themselves from their less civilized tribe. Before being reformed by Mr. House, the White Glove Society were cannibals. While they publicly renounce this behavior, remnants of their old ways persist behind closed doors. Some members, notably Mortimer, seek to revive the group's cannibalistic traditions under the guise of sophistication and secrecy. This internal conflict makes up much of the White Glove Society questline in the game. The Boomers. The Boomers are an isolationist and heavily armed community living at Nellis Air Force Base, northeast of the New Vegas Strip. Originally descendants of Vault 34, the Boomers left the vault due to overcrowding and internal conflict, taking with them a large stockpile of weapons and munitions. What could go wrong? Fiercely independent and wary of outsiders, the Boomers fired upon anyone who approached their territory for decades, earning a deadly reputation across the Mojave. Their obsession with explosives and artillery defines both their culture and daily life. They frequently practice firing mortars, flying with simulation pods, and dream of restoring a pre-war bomber plane, the B-29, that was submerged in the nearby Lake Mead. Despite their hostility towards the outside world, the Boomers are not malicious. Their society is structured, they have an education system, and they value tradition. Much of their worldview is guided by their elders, Pearl and Loyal, who envisions the Boomers as playing a greater role in the Mojave's future, but only if an outsider first proves themselves worthy of trust. The Mojave Brotherhood of Steel. The Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel is a reclusive, technologically obsessed faction headquartered in Hidden Valley, near the outskirts of New Vegas. The chapter came to be after the Lost Hills Elder Council grew tired of a certain problematic elder, Elder Elijah, and sent him and a contingent of members to the Mojave Desert. Once part of a larger, more active Brotherhood presence in the desert, the Mojave chapter was severely weakened after the disastrous Helios 1 campaign against the New California Republic. Following that defeat, the chapter retreated underground and adopted a strictly defensive posture. Now led by Elder McNamara, the Mojave chapter maintains its rigid isolationist doctrine. No outside membership, and only small groups can leave the bunker for asset retrieval and scouting. Internally, the Mojave is divided between those who support McNamara's cautious isolationism and those who, like Head Paladin Hardin, push for a more aggressive, outward-facing strategy. Despite their decline, the Brotherhood still commands some respect due to their advanced power armor, energy weapons, and discipline. They may be on their last steps, but they are certainly not out. The Great Khans. The Great Khans are the third and final iteration of the Khan Raider tribe. After their brutal defeat at the hands of the Chosen One and NCR, the surviving Khans fled east, eventually settling in the Mojave and reclaiming their name once again. By the events of Fallout New Vegas, the Great Khans are based out of Red Rock Canyon, having been driven there following a devastating loss to NCR forces during the Bitter Springs Massacre. The event left deep scars within the tribe, fueling a long-standing hatred of the Republic. Under Papa Khan, the tribe is ideologically stagnant. Once feared raiders, they've grown disillusioned, surviving by manufacturing and selling chems, notably to the Fiends raider tribe. As a way to get back at the Republic, Papa Khan is considering a partnership with Caesar's Legion. Caesar offers the Khans a place in his empire, but it's quite clear that he sees them like any other tribe that he's assimilated, little more than disposable soldiers. Some Khans, especially Regis and Melissa, push for a different future, one of cultural renewal and independence, finally free to pursue the path of their choosing. The Enclave Remnants. Long after the fall of the Enclave in Fallout 2, a handful of its former soldiers and officers scattered across the American wasteland, living in hiding. In the Mojave, the remnants of an Enclave squad do their best to 1. Avoid NCR attention, and 2. Reintegrate into wasteland society. The Enclave remnants are made up of Judah Krieger, Doc Henry, Cannibal Johnson, Orion Marino, and Daisy Whitman. By the start of New Vegas, the remnants are scattered and aging, decades having passed since they last served the old Black E. Arcade Gannon, the child of the squad's leader, was raised among them, but rejects their past. His companion quest can lead to reuniting the remnants and convincing them to take a final stand at the second battle of the Hoover Dam. The Fiends. The Fiends are one of the most dangerous and unstable gangs in the Mojave wasteland. Operating out of the ruins of West New Vegas and Vault 3, they're less of a structured faction and more of a drug-fueled swarm of raiders. Heavily addicted to all sorts of chems, the Fiends are known for erratic behavior and senseless slaughter. They attack NCR patrols, caravans, and settlements, driven by addiction, chaos, and what just seems to be the love of the game. Their leadership, if it can be called that, lies with Motor Runner, who seems to have 3 local lieutenants with Violet, Driver Nafai, and Cook, each infamous for their own brand of cruelty. The NCR considers the Fiends a major threat to regional stability. Despite their disorganized nature, their access to energy weapons and combat chems make them lethal in a fight. Whether they're hunted and put down for good, or left to their own devices, is entirely up to the player. The Jackals. One of the 3 infamous raider tribes to come from Vault 15, the Jackals were some of the most brutal and desperate raider factions in the western wasteland. Trapped during a harsh winter storm, they turned to cannibalism to survive. Since then, eating their enemies quickly became the norm. Before the NCR came to be, the Jackals often raided Shady Sands. However, defeat at the hands of the original Khans forced them to flee to new territory. By 2281, the Jackals are a mere shadow of what they once were. No longer a tribe, but scattered packs of feral raiders, they terrorize the Mojave's highways and empty roads. With no clear leadership or goals beyond bloodshed and scavenging, they merely wait for the wasteland to finish them off. The Vipers. The last of the tribes to emerge from Vault 15 are the Vipers. After discovering a strange pit filled with mutated vipers, their leader, a man named Jonathan Faust, claimed he had spoken with a god and learned the true way. What followed, though, was mass death, hallucinations from venom exposure, and the formation of a fanatical group devoted to the worship of serpents and the teachings of the so-called Great Snake. Yeah, I think they went nuts. Following this event, the Vipers became known for their brutality and religious zealotry. Early on, they raided settlements across New California, even targeting the hub in 2125. Though the raid failed, survivors regrouped in the Badlands and grew under new leadership, conducting frequent attacks on caravans and outposts. Their peak and subsequent demise came during the early 22nd century. The Vipers managed to kill the father of John Maxon, the Lost Hills Brotherhood High Elder at the time. In response, the Brotherhood of Steel launched a focused extermination campaign, and within a month, the Vipers were nearly wiped out. In the Mojave by 2281, the Vipers are disorganized and far removed from their cult roots. They function more like typical raiders, ambushing travelers and caravans, while still clinging to the same name. The Scorpions. The Scorpions are a small-time raider gang operating out of the Monte Carlo Suites in West Side. More bark than bite, or maybe like more claw than sting, they're known for low-level chem dealings, petty violence, and making life harder for the already struggling residents around them. Most of the Scorpions' energy is spent trying to hold on to scraps of territory while avoiding being wiped out entirely. The Greasers. Another wholly unremarkable faction in New Vegas are the Greasers. Still, they're one of the few raider gangs in the entirety of Fallout that do have a name. The Greasers are a small-time gang living in the sewers underneath West Side. Recently moved in, they've made life miserable for other local residents. As such, their presence is a growing concern for West Side's informal leader, Crandon, who tasks the courier with removing them. The Bright Brotherhood. The Bright Brotherhood is a cult-like group of non-feral ghouls and one human located in the Repcon test site near Novak. Led by Jason Bright, a glowing one who claimed to see divine visions from a being known as the Creator, the group seeks to undertake a great journey to the far beyond, a promised land free from human bigotry and the violence of the wasteland. Jason Bright's teachings are based on these visions, and while he welcomes skepticism, he holds the Creator's will as absolute. The Brotherhood focuses on preparing for their journey through restoring several pre-war rockets located beneath the Repcon facility. Among their numbers is Chris Haversum, a deluded human who believes himself to be a ghoul. Though not allowed to join the journey, he is ultimately seen as a saint for his role in aiding the Brotherhood's cause. Though the cult's plans were delayed by an invasion of stealth boy-addicted Nightkin. With the courier's help in clearing the facility and sourcing parts and fuel, the Bright Brotherhood is able to complete their preparations and launch their rockets, ultimately fulfilling their great journey to an unknown destination beyond the Mojave. Hopefully. The Kings. After being cast out by Mr. House during his reclamation of Vegas, one Mojave tribe stumbled across the pre-war King's School of Impersonation. Inside, they found relics devoted to a long-dead cultural icon, an unnamed singer with slicked-back hair, a love for denim jeans, and a unique combination of style and music. Inspired, the tribe rebranded as the Kings, dressing the part and following a loose code built on respect, freedom, and despite dressing the same, individuality. Every man is a king in his own right. Led by a charismatic figure who adopted the title of the King, the group grew into Freeside's dominant gang and de facto leaders. They've stayed fiercely independent, resisting both the NCR's expansion and Mr. House's control. While they may look like simple Elvis impersonators, the Kings are street-savvy, territorial, and not afraid to fight for their slice of Vegas. However, not all of their conflicts are good in nature. Hotheads like Pacer have made tensions worse, picking fights with NCR squatters and risking all-out war in the streets. The Kings do their best to keep Freeside safe, even if their best isn't always enough. Powder Gangers. Lots of gangs and raiders in New Vegas, though I suppose the frontier nature of the Mojave lends to that. The Powder Gangers were originally inmates of the NCR Correctional Facility in the Mojave. As part of a work release program under NCR supervision, the prisoners maintained rail lines along the Long 15, keeping the vital trade route between the Boneyard and New Vegas alive. But when NCR forces were pulled away to fight the Legion, the prison was left vulnerable. Led by Samuel Cook, the inmates staged a violent uprising, seizing weapons and dynamite to overthrow the remaining guards. After the successful revolt, the prisoners fractured into smaller factions. Some followed Cook into Vault 19, but many stayed behind at the prison, now led by Eddie. They used their stolen explosives to terrorize the region, blowing up NCR supply lines, attacking caravans, and raiding nearby settlements like Good Springs and Prim. The Powder Gangers' situation worsened when they raided the small mining camp of Sloan for its dynamite supply, unintentionally unleashing death claws from Quarry Junction and cutting off NCR access to Vegas via the I-15. With camps set up around the prison, the Powder Gangers remain a scattered but dangerous force. The Circle of Steel. The Circle of Steel is a secretive branch of the Brotherhood of Steel. Acting as internal affairs, their role is to police the Brotherhood from within. Their services are typically used when a member goes rogue or breaks the organization's rigid code of conduct. Such was the case when Elder Elijah of the Mojave chapter fled the faction after suffering an embarrassing defeat at the hands of the NCR at Helios 1. One of the Circle's members, Christine Royce, would be responsible for tracking and assassinating the disgraced Elder. The Sorrows. The Sorrows are a peaceful and deeply spiritual tribe living in Zion Canyon. Their origins trace back to 2123 when a group of 24 children, fleeing an unknown facility called The School, found refuge in Zion Canyon. These children were quietly guided by a mysterious figure they came to know only as the Father. Unbeknownst to them, the Father was Randall Clark, a reclusive ex-soldier and survivalist who had been living in Zion since the Great War. Observing the children from afar, Clark left behind books, supplies, and handwritten notes, offering both advice and guidance. His messages encouraged the children to be kind, modest, and strong, teaching them to see Zion as a sacred gift, a place of healing to make up for the sorrows of their past. After Clark's death, the children formed a tribal identity around his teachings, naming themselves the Sorrows. Over generations, his words became the foundation of their faith. A tragic accident, when one of them was killed by a trap in a cave once used by Clark, led the tribe to declare all pre-war structures and caves taboo, believing further trespassing would anger the Father. Today, the Sorrows are best known for their pacifism and spiritual ties to Zion, though by the events of Honest Hearts, an impending attack from a warring raider tribe threatens their way of life. The Dead Horses. The Dead Horses are another tribe of Zion Canyon. They're the descendants of Great War survivors who once lived in or visited a place called Rez, east of the Grand Canyon. Over generations, these remnants formed a new identity, speaking a sort of Creole language born from the mingled dialects, and building a life along the banks of the Colorado River at Dead Horse Point. Their history took a sharp turn when they first met Joshua Graham, Kaiser's feared legate at the time. Preparing them for assimilation into the Legion, Graham taught them various survival and warfare skills. But before they could be absorbed into Kaiser's ranks, Graham was called away to lead the Legion at the First Battle of the Hoover Dam. I think we all know what happened there. In Graham's absence, the Dead Horses honored his teachings, but turned to raiding, prompting retaliation that drove them from their home and into Zion. Years later, a changed Joshua Graham, having survived his execution and abandoned by the Legion, found the Dead Horses again. He became their war chief, teaching them to defend rather than conquer, and guiding them away from their violent raider legacy. Under his leadership, the Dead Horses reclaimed their homeland and later answered the call to defend Zion from the Whitelegs, aiding the Sorrows and other new Canaanite survivors. Whether through evacuation or resistance, the tribe's involvement in Zion's defense would be a defining moment in Dead Horse history. The Whitelegs. The Whitelegs are a brutal raider tribe from the Salt Lake region of Utah, descended from pre-war survivors and tourists stranded in the aftermath of the Great War. Known for painting their bodies, notably their legs, white to blend with the salt flats, the tribe developed a savage culture built on scavenging and raiding. Kept in check for decades by the New Canaanites and Desert Rangers, their boldness grew after the Rangers merged with the NCR, leaving northern territories unguarded. Soon the Whitelegs had seized large swaths of land, destroying bridges and caravan routes to isolate and control the region. Their ambitions exploded with the arrival of Ulysses, a frumentarius of Kaiser's legion. He offered them the chance to gain favor with Kaiser by annihilating New Canaan and killing the ex-legate Joshua Graham. The sacking of New Canaan was brutal, homes burned, civilians hunted, and the land salted. But Graham survived. When he fled to Zion, the Whitelegs followed, launching a campaign of terror against the Sorrows and Dead Horses, desperate to earn their place in the Legion. The Think Tank. The Think Tank is a group of genius pre-war scientists working out of a top-secret government facility, the Big Mountain Research and Development Center. To escape the certain death of the Great War and continue their research, the group placed their minds into machines. These scientists are some of the most brilliant minds in the country. But over these centuries, their detachment from humanity and unchecked experimentation turned them into eccentric, often dangerous figures. They've become erratic, isolated, and their goals are ultimately unclear. Despite their madness, the think tank and Big Empty hide some of the most advanced technology in the wasteland. The government. The only real noteworthy faction from the TV series that has yet to be mentioned in this video so far is the government. Following the destruction of Shady Sands and the weakening of the new California Republic, various smaller factions popped up to fill the space once occupied by the Republic. Sorrel Booker's government was one such group. Despite the official sounding name, the government is little more than a group of thugs. Not much is known about them, aside from the fact that they were working a protection racket for an organ harvesting business set up in an old super-duper mart. However, this group takes quite the hit after the ghoul kills 2 of the government's sheriffs. RIP, I guess. And that wraps up just about every notable faction from the West Coast wasteland. From religious cults to those who wish to return to the old world, the wasteland is filled with folks from all walks of life, each with their own goals and desires. Some want power, others seek purpose, but every single one of them is trying to survive in a world that's long since ended. Whether they rise, fall, or fade into obscurity, each of these factions have left their mark on the wasteland. That's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Who is your favorite West Coast faction? Join the Discord. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Habologists.